Hello and welcome to Nerdarchy. For nerds, by nerds. I'm Nerdist Dave, and today I'm joined by Micah. I'm sorry, from at Pyromaniac Press or Pyromaniac. I can't talk today, man. Just get dope. Pyromaniac Press, Maniac. Is it Maniac or Manic? Maniac.
Pyromaniac Press.
Yeah.
Yes.
The whole hour is just going to be me stumbling over words now. That's what we're doing today. How are you doing
That's
today,
okay.
Micah?
That can be part of this
Yeah.
chat, and that'll be the hook.
Yeah,
Everyone
yeah.
can watch us struggle. It's lunchtime for you. It's midnight for me. So we're we're just trying to connect across the earth.
That's it, man. So, if you'd be so kind to kind of introduce yourself for people that aren't familiar, and tell them a little bit about what you do.
Sure. I'm a small publisher producer, primarily on DM's Guild and Drive-Through RPG, primarily fifth edition material to work with the official material. A little bit of Pathfinder in my background, but for the most part, it's D&D. I've got some 30 years experience playing D&D, and I love it and can't get enough of it. So I've got I think about 50 odd products across the two sites. Fairly constantly producing content for the DM's Guild. Work with a lot of other DM's Guild creatives. Dabbled my toes in the waters of Kickstarters a few times. Perhaps have some of those coming up in the future. But yeah, I just love to create content and get it out there and work with other people in the industry.
And as always, folks, there will be links in the description, so go click away and follow Micah across the web. So, are you creating content full time?
I wish. Unfortunately, I have a family and a mortgage, so
Yeah.
I'm not quite ready to cast it all to the winds and roll the dice and try my luck. So I do work a day job, and then in the spare time I have, I manically sort of smash the keyboard at midnight and roll my face across it and occasionally come up with a good idea. So.
Nice. I mean, you're hardly unique in that arena as far as RPGs go. I feel like there's a ton of part timers, more than anything, but because it is challenging to make a decent living doing design work. It is getting better though, and crowdfunding has made it easier.
Yeah, absolutely, and I think there's more awareness of it now. I mean, D&D is becoming incredibly popular. It's the most popular it's ever been. I've been playing for 30 years, and I've in all my time I've never seen anything like this. At the height of TSR's powers, it was still a very small thing, and now we're seeing it sort of break into mainstream culture. We're getting movies. We're getting celebrities play. We're getting big D&D live events and so forth. And even with the pandemic, which has hurt a lot of people in a lot of ways, it's still it's a game you can play across the world. You and I can sit down on a VTT and play D&D still. So it is just going strength to strength, and I think accessibility of publishing now is much easier for content creators. With platforms like Drive-Through RPG, where you have a lot of control over your material, and DM's Guild, where you have access to the official IP. You're able to use the characters and the settings that are popular and so forth. And as you said, Kickstarters becoming a big avenue for getting your content out there. A few years ago, I don't think RPG content was as well spread across these crowdfunding platforms, but now it seems like every second day something exciting comes up, and you you look at your wallet and think, oh, how much is this going to hurt? But
Yeah.
there's some really good stuff out there. So yeah, lots of opportunities these days. Lots of opportunities.
Well, we've had so many Kickstarters now that have done over $1 million for RPGs, which is crazy, and it's just kind of like fueling the industry and small creators are able to you know do this where before it would have been virtually impossible, especially to do it on your own. I mean, the internet has really kind of leveled the playing field for a lot of us smaller creators to be able to get out there and get the word out, uh, and have a shot at this. Like before, you had to go through, an established publishing company and have them kind of choose you, right, out of everyone to be able
Yep.
to even have a shot at doing this for a living.
Well, I think again, the community's grown so big, and I have to admit, while any fandom can have its bad actors, the RPG community as a whole, I think, is incredibly supportive. When people are bringing out products, I think a lot of us look at that and think, well, that's great. I'd love that in my game too. And as this becomes more acceptable and people are able to take these steps, these new platforms do arrive. Social media allows us to get our messages out there, and let people know that we are doing stuff, and so forth. And certainly I think there's become more and more confidence in small producers. Certainly over the time that I've been doing it, when I first started, I think a lot of small producers, particularly on drive through, and even in the very early days of DM's Guild, the content was, and I don't want to use this term disparaging, but it was homebrew. There was a
Yeah.
lot of, an idea that came up at someone's table. Everyone had a good session. Let's throw that up on DM's Guild and see what other people think. Reddit got a lot of mileage out of I had a great idea at my table kind of thing. And I remember getting onto the DM's Guild early, and there wasn't a lot of art cover pages. It was mostly just small bits and pieces of people having these ideas. In the last few years, it's become semi-professional to professional. I mean, we're seeing recognized authors in the field now begin to actually put their content up on DM's Guild. So Keith Baker's obviously the big one, the creator of the Eberron setting, and he's going great guns. And there's a number of others. We're starting to see some of the Forgotten Realms alum dip their toes in the water. George Krashos and Eric Boyd. These are basically the lore gurus of the Forgotten Realms. They've been around and through it all. They're starting to produce content as well. So it's become less fringe and a little bit more recognized that you can get some very high quality content. But it still doesn't edge out the small producers who just want to get their ideas up there. There's a lot of content on these platforms now, though. Very difficult to
More than
stand out from the crowd.
more than you could ever sift through. That is
Oh,
the tricky part,
absolutely.
is getting it noticed. Now you said you've got like 50 products. That's a lot. That's a lot of work. That's a lot of content out there. What are you working on nowadays?
Yeah, look, I'm actually doing a bit of everything at the moment. So I, like a lot of the creators in the community, I write my own products, but I also spend a lot of time collaborating with others. And some of it's under the umbrella of Pyromaniac Press, and some of it's under other people's umbrellas, whether they have, a business, or a brand, or just, a product they want to produce. So, I mean, the latest one from Pyromaniac Press is a book called Blackstaff's Book of Bloodlines. It's actually a second product of its kind, and about a third or fourth product in a series dealing with magic in the Forgotten Realms, and particularly, taking advantage of the intellectual property offered by Wizards of the Coast on the DM's Guild, allowing us to use some of the characters, locations, and previous named spellcasters and things like that. So the current book, the Book of Bloodlines, is sorcerer archetypes for 5th edition. So myself and a number of other DM's Guild creators got together and basically came up with these new archetypes for sorcerers. There's 31 in the book. They come with their own unique flavored spells to get more out of the different concepts, and they're based on lots of different things. So, I mean, Bloodlines is it's a bit of alliteration, Blackstaff's Book of Bloodlines, to kind of get it to run off the tongue, but it's all about sorcerer origins, where they get their power from, the root sort of spark of it, if you like, and whether it's a sorcerer who's gained that power, whether it's passed down through their family or whatnot. Just lots of new and interesting ways of playing your sorcerers. So we've got monster based origins, where it might be the character or the family has been influenced by monsters, so beholders, Medusa, illithids, other serpentine monsters. We've got some undead origins in there, but also some of the classics come into it as well. We're pretty eclectic. We reach back into some of the older editions. So one of the contributors, Jeremy Forbing, put together a Spellfire archetype. Spellfire is something that's been around in D&D since about first edition. Crops up here and there. The original rules they brought out for it were horribly overpowered and didn't really work
Isn't that
with
the
the rule set.
Pool of Radiance books?
No, they're the although they do dovetail into some of the same places and areas, but they're the Chandril Chassair books. So they do have a little bit of crossover there, but for the most part, it deals with sort of an unknown character that has a very powerful attachment to the weave and can generate this raw magical energy, and her interactions with Elminster and the Seven Sisters, who can also produce silver fire, which is very similar, and the dark forces in the Forgotten Realms that want this really rare power and sort of hunt her for it. So there's Zentarum and a number of other sort of groups looking to take advantage of that. So, I mean, again, for the old lore nerds, it's a bit of a blast from the past. I don't think it's really come up in the last sort of half a dozen years in a lot of this new material coming through. But some of the old heads might recognize it, and I think a few people would like to have an opportunity to see if we can actually get it into the current rules. And just some other things. There's a lot of lore sprinkled in there as well. The books are presented, and the series are presented from the, I guess, the perspective or a guided tour by Blackstaff, and the transition of the position of the Blackstaff as well. So again, going back in the lore, which we're all as creators very interested in reliving and keeping alive and moving with the editions. In first and second edition, the Blackstaff was Kelvin Aronson, held the position of the Blackstaff, carried an artifact called the Blackstaff. By fifth edition, we've actually moved on to Vajra Safar, and she was brought out for Waterdeep Dragon Heist. And as the history of the realms has moved on and the characters have had the NPCs have had their various sort of lifespans, you sort of see this kind of passing of the torch from an older to newer, an old edition to new edition, and in some ways it's a bit of a sort of a lens on how the D&D itself is actually evolving. So some of us are fairly excited for some of these changes. So these books, the one before it was Blackstaff's Tome of Wizardry, actually had wizard archetypes and was this kind of, I guess, passing the torch conversation between the shade remnants of Kelvin Blackstaff and Vajra, the new Blackstaff. This next book is just, her on her own, basically coming into being the expert and the protector of Waterdeep and moving out of Kelvin's shadow, so to speak. So And the collaborators, these are the two I've produced. The collaborators that I work with, and there's a bit of a sort of, a shuffling cast, but there's also been a number of other books in this sort of, loose series. There's a set of, there's a book on warlock archetypes. There's a book of 1,000 spells, and these are spells, some new spells, but a lot of revamp from old editions. And a book of magic items in the same vein. A lot of new magic items, but a lot of old edition items brought forth into the fifth edition rules. So yeah, we went down the rabbit hole a little bit.
Did you guys bring back warp wood and sticks to snakes?
You know what? No, not in these ones. Warpwood and Sticks to Snakes were second edition cleric spells, as no doubt you're aware. I say that for the benefit of some of the listeners.
Yeah, yeah.
I think I certainly am not in a position to be teaching you anything about D&D. But we did actually, again, some of the same collaborators produced some books based off or bringing forth the old second and third edition lore into new fifth edition mechanics. A set of books called Faiths of the Forgotten Realms, where we actually went back to the second edition Faiths and Avatars, the third edition Faiths and Powers, and brought paladin and cleric archetypes for the old specialty clerics and specialty priests and so forth. So a lot of those spells came over, new iterations of these old spells. So it's a bit of a walk through memory lane for a lot of us, because I mean a number of and we work with, again, all sorts of old grognards to people that have picked the books up in the last couple of years. And a couple of us look back fondly on the days of first and second edition where we started playing D&D, and trying to bring some of those our old favorite spells from back in the day to people that haven't seen these things. And some of the new creators, this is all new stuff to them. You say Sticks to Snakes, and everyone looks at you weirdly. But at least not all the old favorites went the way of the dodo. I mean, there's some good upgrades from the old spells to new in the official material. In fact, some of them even got better. The old heat metal wasn't quite the spell it is today. It's
Oh,
it's
now
got a bit of a boost.
now it's terrible. It's just so terrible for GMs. Actually, for everybody, really. Like if someone hits you with heat metal and then walks away, you're in armor, you're just like screwed.
Yeah, well, this is the thing. I mean, it's back in the day, as a cleric, you went to it because clerics didn't have a lot of offensive spells, and it had its uses, but it certainly wasn't as potent as it is now. The other one, spiritual weapon, is considerably more useful these days than it used to be way back in first and second edition. So, but I mean, there's some great old favorites that just didn't make the transition because the rules work a little bit different these
Yeah.
days, as they should with different editions. So, but I mean, I think there are certainly ways and means to get that flavor in there. So yeah, a lot of this is a bit of a trip down memory lane for some of us, but it's it's all new content, and hopefully people enjoy it. Get to play it at the tables. I do get some feedback from time to time saying I love this, or this wasn't so great, and that's okay. I mean, all feedback's good feedback.
So is Forgotten Realms one of your favorite places to kind of tinker around in?
It
Or is it
is.
about accessibility?
No. It is. So it's for me. I actually got my start. I mean, I've played all the editions. I've played all of the settings in a greater or smaller degree, and I have to admit, my personal favorite setting is actually Planescape. And I've got my fingers crossed for the next couple of years with the announcement of some of the old campaigns coming back. I mean, I'm not holding my breath or anything, but Planescape kind of links everything together. So I'm sort of hoping at some stage they'll delve into that and open up, the city of Sigil and some of the personalities and places from Planescape. But when I got my start, I actually started playing in the Forgotten Realms, and when I started DMing it was the setting that I had, so it was the setting I ran in. So I've got 30 years worth of history with the Forgotten Realms. I do have a special place in my heart for some of the other settings. We played some Greyhawk back in the day. I do love Dark Sun. You know, some of the concepts. You know, some of the old settings need a little bit of polish. But and of course, Dragonlance. I was a huge Dragonlance fan as a kid. The first novels I ever read were Dragonlance novels, so I got very attached to that as well. So yeah, I'd sort of dabble around in it, but for me, it worked out well that the DM's Guild IP, they open sections up periodically. Forgotten Realms being the flagship setting, I guess, the accessibility of it for everyone, the fact that it's a fairly, and I don't say this with any critique, but it's a fairly standard fantasy setting. It's certainly you know, not as out there as say Spelljammer or something like that. So it's fairly easy for people to get into and not have to completely suspend their disbelief. So you know, that's the first IP they opened up. Then they opened up Ravenloft, Eberron, yeah, and so forth. And you know, hopefully we'll see more and more of these settings become accessible. And if they ever open up Planescape, I'll probably stop producing Forgotten Realms content for a while and just, you know, 30 years worth of ideas of
Yeah.
Planescape suddenly start appearing on the DM's Guild from me.
I was gonna I was gonna
Sorry, go on.
ask you if you had to pick which property next, which one it would be, but it sounds like we've already heard now.
Yes, no, I I have very fond memories of Planescape. It's a very weird setting for, I guess, for the uh, audience that may not know it. It's about the multiverse and how it connects to everything else. It's the planes of existence. But what I really love about it is you know, the philosophy that comes with it. You know, the trying to find your place in the universe. That, you know, thoughts, feelings, behaviors have real power to change the fundamentals of how the universe works. That you can go anywhere and do anything, and most importantly for me, that there is always a bigger fish. So murder hobos do not last long in Planescape, because you walk into a tavern and there's, you know, a Solar, you know, drinking with a pit fiend, and you know, debating philosophy instead of killing each other. And should you turn down the wrong alley and upset the wrong person, you may be whisked away to a plane and never seen again. You know, imprisoned on Carcerai or something like that. So
Planescape really brought forward factions too, right?
mm,
Like more in D&D anyway, and more so than any of the previous products. I felt like.
yeah, well, I mean, even things like, you know, Greyhawk, Forgotten Realms, and so forth, they had these societies or factions, but they were always NPC driven. They were story items, but you never really, you know, you didn't play as the Harpers. You know, the Zentarum were always couched as these kind of shadowy bad guys to move the plot along. Planescape was the first setting where you really got to pick a philosophy that actually impacted on your character, and it had mechanical impacts as well. If you chose one faction over another, you actually got mechanical benefits for that as part of the game. So I think it was the first setting that really allowed you to lean into that allegiance to a faction or an idea, and have it have a meaningful impact on your character. And certainly you see that now with the factions that they're producing. I mean, it's a no-brainer that if they do produce Planescape, those factions will become available much the same way as your Lord's Alliance, your Emerald Enclave, your Harpers, your Zentarum are available now as part of the, you know, Forgotten Realms setting. So yeah, but it's Planescape's just this weird and wonderful sort of, you know, kaleidoscopic mess of everything and anything. And it lends itself to both serious play and a little bit of, you know, sort of gonzo craziness of, you know, chaos and randomness, but it's just got this wonderful depth to it. So yeah, uh,
Also,
long
like it was
answer to a
really
short question.
yeah,
I'm if anyone from Wizards is watching, Planescape, please.
yeah. And if anything, too, like the art really set it apart. You know, Tony D. Orlizzi doing the art. I mean, just the same way, like, Dark Sun with the Brahm, right? Like, no, I feel like
It
none of the
really,
other settings had kind of like the draw those two did because of those artists.
well, I think they were so different from what you're used to seeing in terms of the artwork. I mean,
Yeah,
Brom's work is hard, chiseled, pale, desolate. It's very Frank Frazetta in a lot of ways as well. But even if you look at Brom's work from other settings that aren't Dark Sun, I mean, he's clearly the standout artist of Dark Sun. But if you look at his other works, I mean, that carries through, but it never really resonates with the setting the same way his style does with Dark Sun. I mean, it really
yeah.
defines just how hard it is to live in this world of no resources, where everyone's out for themselves, where magic is killing the world, and there are no easy fixes. Where you're as tough as nails, because if you aren't, you just aren't going to live through the day. So I love thing about Dark Sun as well is it had that sort of subsistence kind of fantasy. It wasn't low fantasy in concept, but it was low fantasy in mechanics. You had weapons made out of bone or stone, or you know metal was the new
It was
rare
just
magical
it
thing.
was survivalist D&D, right? Like,
Yeah, but
a,
but it still had these really high concepts of the psionics, and how you're surviving in a world that's been shattered by greed and lust for power and tyranny, and there are still ways to get by without screwing people over, but you really have to dig deep for that. You've got to find that in this everyday water and food kind of gritty thing, you have to dig deep to find those real heroic moments. I really enjoyed that. But Brom's art, it gave it its desolation. It looked he just captured this concept of every breath is hard, every moment is difficult, you are going to struggle. And
everything's a needed resource. If you don't get it, you're going to die, including you, right? Like, in that world, you're somebody else's resource.
yeah,
Uh,
absolutely,
it,
absolutely.
and it might
And
just be a psionic plant that is going to eat you.
yeah.
But,
Plus, I mean, of course, Dark Sun brought in the cannibalistic halflings, which is
yeah.
still my favorite iteration of halfling. Um,
The idea that
I
everyone is terrified of halflings is
Yes.
great.
And again, it's just it's a nice spin on a lot of these old standard tropes. I mean,
Hmm.
stereotypes are there for a reason. They're comfortable, they're fun. We identify with them, we keep them. But Dark Sun turned a lot of that on its head, and uh, they didn't have to change a lot of things. They still kept all the fantasy races. They just gave them a different spin, but just enough of the turn of the wheel to make it unique.
Not all of
But
them.
going,
They definitely flip the bird at certain ones,
yeah,
like the gnome. They're like, there will
yeah,
be no gnomes.
no gnomes
Hmm.
and beardless dwarves.
Yeah.
You're traveling through the desert and you find these strange statues that look like dwarves, but they all have these ridiculous beards. Dwarves are completely hairless on Athas, so everyone's scratching their heads as to where this ancient race of dwarf-like beings went. But going back to your point about Tony Delizzi as well, I mean, that art is some of the most whimsical art I've seen, yet still has that. I mean, it's got this great sense of wonder to it, but he's also manages to convey, some genuine threats. If you look through some of the Planescape books, you see these, almost whimsical sort of, pit fiends, but
Yeah.
they actually look menacing because it's all Cheshire cat stuff, really big grins, sharp teeth. It's got that Alice in Wonderland, you know, feel, not the kiddie version, the wow, things are really going down the rabbit hole version,
I,
like it's getting weird.
yeah, I want to call it whimsical, but at the same time, I'm like, that word doesn't feel right either. Uh,
No, it's very hard to define.
yeah,
But the thing is, you can pick his art anywhere.
yeah.
It's such a unique style. Uh, but it's it's all very elongated and slightly cartoonic. I mean, it certainly doesn't rest in that the Brom style of realism. Brom's art is some of the realistic you've seen in D&D. You really don't get anyone else who does that. But yeah, Tony's still. I mean, I don't know. I have a soft spot in my heart for Elmore because
Yeah.
the Dragonlance art and things like that. Um, and of course you've got Keith Parkinson did some stuff which was amazing, particularly in original D&D and first edition. I mean, there's just so many great artists out there, but yeah, Bromman and Tony Delizzi just have these such unique styles, and they became intrinsic. That's the thing. When people talk about Brom, they immediately think about Dark Sun. When people talk about Tony, they immediately think of Planescape. That art is intrinsic to those settings. It's welded in, but it really brings something to the table. They just wouldn't be the same. It wouldn't be the same. Planescape wouldn't be the same without Tony's art. It just wouldn't make sense to me.
No. Who who did the cover? Do you know who did the cover for the Dragonlance book? The actual D&D book. Like that's one of my favorites.
Is that are you talking about the one with Dragonlance Adventures, the one with
Yeah,
Ariakis
it's got Tatis
holding
on
up
the cover holding up the crown.
above Ariakis? Yeah, actually,
Yeah.
not off the top of my head. It's on my shelf somewhere. I could probably dredge it up, or we
Oh,
could,
you still have it.
Google it.
That is super cool.
I've got a smattering of stuff from all over the place. So I don't my work area is a little bit messy at the moment. I just finished a D&D game where I crafted this whole goblin fortress out of foam and pop
Yeah.
sticks and so forth. So my bench next to me is just covered in glue and all sorts of crap. But to that side of my camera, you can start to see my D&D shelves, and yeah, I've got first, second, third edition stuff. I don't have a complete set of anything, but I do have lots of bits and pieces. So I don't actually have a lot of Dragonlance stuff, unfortunately.
I
But
got
yeah,
rid of
the
so
the
much
adventures is
stuff
kicking
over the
around there somewhere.
years.
Sorry.
I got rid of so much stuff over the years. I really it's just Jeff Easley.
Oh, is it? Yeah. Well, I mean, Easley's another one who's instantly
More
recognizable,
easily. Yeah,
and
they're iconic
yeah,
from that
peppered through
era.
all the official books as well. In just those big one-page splashes of the So I mean, easily, yeah. So Easter's got a couple of really, really recognizable ones as well. The Swan May in the swamp being hunted by the lizard folk, and a few others. He's actually got like a Monster Slayer series with a warrior and a monster below them, kind of thing. There's about a half a dozen of those that are really quite special.
So what is your like favorite kind of products to work on?
That's a really interesting question. So I'm not sure I have a favorite. I got asked this a little while ago. I dabble in bits of everything. I mean, in terms of what I've produced most of, and certainly most of lately, archetypes. I've probably personally written 100 or more archetypes, I'd say, across my products. The books themselves often will have 30 to 50 or more archetypes. The Book of Bloodlines has 30. The Tome of Wizardry has 30, 31, I think. And of course, we've shared that across the various groups. But the Faiths books, I think I did about 30 or 40 for the first Faiths book, and about the same for the second Faiths book. So, and I've produced a couple of smaller books. I did an Avernus one when Descent to Avernus was brought out, for a couple of archetypes dealing with surviving Avernus. And I think I did one for Icewind Dale where I did some stuff for that as well. So I do a lot of archetypes, but I mean, just literally this in the last sort of week and a half, I've been in 3 products doing 3 completely different things. So I released Blackstar's Book of Bloodlines. A book just came out a couple of days ago called Tales of the Feywild, produced by Elise Cradle. The first book, volume 1, was, I think, Adventures. I wasn't part of that one, but volume 2 is magic items, and I contributed some magic items to that. We've done some monster books. We released a product not that long ago called the Cubonomicon, where we produced a whole bunch of gelatinous cubes of various types.
Nice.
So they range from, like little kind of familiar cubes, so they're no hit points. They kind of go around the dungeon eating rats. To I created CR20 swarm called the Cubepocalypse Swarm, and it's basically just this endless wave of gelatinous cubes that strip the land bare as they go, and everything in between. We had a lot of fun with that one. The art in that is pretty whimsical, so we had a good time with that. So I do monsters. I'm doing some monsters now for another book. Today, actually, I've been working with a gent by the name of Christian Zush, who produces a lot of these sort of small gazetteers, kind of add-on items to various things. He produced hexes and I think powers for Ravenloft. He produces these kind of, like additional books for each adventure, hardcover adventure. So Encounters in Icewind Dale, he's done one for Saltmarsh. I think he's done one for most of them, and he's sort of working through them. So the one we released today was Encounters in Chult. So extra material for Tomb of Annihilation. We've produced, I think, 10 new encounter locations with maps. I jazzed up some of the iconic fights. So the zombie T-Rex is now a considerably more dangerous foe. If I don't know if you've played TOA, when you get to the city, the lost city where the tomb actually is, you encounter a really cool concept. It's a tabaxi who's basically lost his mind. It's called Bag of Nails, and he's on his last hunt before he dies, and so he's basically going out in a blaze of glory kind of thing. And he's senile and kind of lost it a little bit, and the book sets him up to be a kind of an ambush encounter where you defeat him, and you can basically, if you don't just kill him outright, you can kind of get him to divulge some information about the city. But mechanically, he's a glass cannon, so he's an assassin. He's a really high chance of killing a character outright from ambush, and then as soon as the round starts, within 2 or 3 attacks, he's going to be down or defeated. And of course, in Tomb of Annihilation, death is
Bad.
a real handicap.
Yeah.
So I retooled him to be this, and pun intended, this cat and mouse hunter. So his attacks aren't as heavy, but he's got all these great run and hide abilities. He sets traps. So you can actually have this game of cat and mouse with this predatory hunter throughout Omu. And you don't run the risk of just dying from ambush, but if you want to catch him, you really got to work hard at it. So I had a lot of fun with that, and I've run Tomb of Annihilation a couple of times now, so I'm very familiar with the content. But that comes with a couple of new stat blocks, new encounter types, some changes to make, some life, quality of life changes. I actually tooled a little bit with the Death Curse to make it not quite as brutal on players. So the idea being, again, if you're not familiar with it, at the beginning of Tomb of Annihilation, there's an NPC which gives you the quest, and says you need to go to Chult because everyone who's been resurrected is slowly dying again, and when people die, they can't be resurrected. So someone needs to go down there and find out what happens. And you got the ticking clock. So Syndra, who is your NPC contact, has been resurrected in the past, and she's slowly dying. At a certain point in the campaign, if you take too long, she actually perishes. And if you die in the campaign, you can't be resurrected. And every day you've got to make a dice roll to see if your soul is destroyed. And if it's destroyed, that's it for that character. So as much as it is certainly a sort of Damocles style of, you need to be careful because there's real stakes here, I've had a number of players lose characters at various points and been forced to bring in, a ringer, or for Adventurers
Yeah.
League, they provide you with these kind of paper cutout characters to carry you through. But I sort of thought, well, what would be good is if it wasn't an all or nothing prospect, but you still kept that that buy-in. So the idea, you can be resurrected within a minute. So Revivify works, Raise Dead works, etc. But then you've got the ticking clock on you. Every day you need to make a save. Every day you pass it, the DC gets higher. When you eventually fail, you lose a hit dice, and then the clock is reset back to low DC. And so as you're traveling through the jungle, you're getting weaker and weaker and weaker without any huge mechanical detriment. But if you don't get a wriggle on, your character is inevitably going to die. So it gives players the opportunity to keep their favorite character, but still keeps the stakes in the game for them. So that mechanic was received pretty well in one of my games. So hopefully, if people like that sort of thing, it's available in this product for them. So again, really long answer to a really short question. I don't have a favorite aspect of products. I like writing adventures. I like writing rules mechanics. I like writing quality of life stuff for DMs to make running games easier. I like making cool archetypes for players to, play a different spin on an old favorite class. So, yeah, bits of everything. I'm not a
With
specialist.
having written so many subclasses and archetypes, are you getting close to the bottom of the well?
I don't think you'll ever get to the bottom of the well. I mean, it's the sky's the limit. Your imagination is the limit. I think there's enough in every. I mean, certainly, I have to say, certainly, after going through Faiths and Avatar, Faiths and of the Forgotten Realms, where book one covered the 48 gods that appeared in Sword Coast Adventurer's Guide, and then book two covered 50 gods for the non-human races, so elves, drow, dwarves, halflings, orcs. We put a couple of dragon gods in there as well. Pretty serious burnout on cleric and paladin and faithful archetypes there for a little while. My well went dry, but in terms of creating archetypes, I don't think that'll ever. You'll never run out of concepts. It's like saying, eventually, someone who will write the last song because we've used all the notes.
Yeah.
There'll never be an end. There's always going to be a new concept, a new idea, tweak on an old idea that sets off a light bulb or a spark in someone, and they go, "Oh, wouldn't it be great if this, but this too?" And the stuff that gets people excited. So no, I don't think I'll ever stop writing archetypes, and I'm not the only one doing it. There's lots of great archetypes out there. I try to look again at the creators creating really good, balanced thematic archetypes, and as much as possible, we try to collaborate because everyone brings something interesting to the table. A book that's got 10 collaborators in it gets 10 different perspectives, 10 different narratives, 10 different, great ways of looking at stuff. I mean, I have my likes, my dislikes, my strengths and weaknesses. I produce content in a certain way. Other people come to the table and they go, I've got this great idea. And they just put something down that you never would have thought of yourself. But since they put it down, suddenly it sparks a new idea in you. And between the two of you or the three of you or the 10 of you, the sum is greater than its parts. You get products which are much more refined from a group of collaborators, generally speaking, than from a single author. I, in many ways, prefer to collaborate than to simply produce on my own. I think
So
there's a great deal of value in that.
you've been pretty prolific. How do you find time to, family, day job, create all this content, and still game?
It comes in waves. So the I I'm very lucky. I'm very lucky in a lot of ways. I have a steady job that has maintained so through the last couple of years, which has been tough for everyone. I actually work in health and safety. So as COVID began to hit our business, my actual uh, responsibilities became more significant than they ever have been before. So I have a wonderful family and a son who thankfully is going to school. So I'm past the up all hours of the night stage of family. Um, I'm very lucky again, and we sort of touched on this earlier, talking about the ease at which you can access gaming. I have a local game store that I run a game at once a week, and I do the occasional sort of drop-in game of AL or something like that, where you can just drop into the shop, see some people, roll some dice, and then go home. I've got a group I've been playing with for 30 years, and they're life takes you to funny places. We're all Australian, but one of my best friends of 30 years is actually currently in the US. He's a solar astronomer. There are very few places in the world that call for that specialty. So he's in Northern California right now. So we play every week over virtual tabletop. I think it's about staying organized, knowing where you've got coming up. I mean, don't get me wrong. There are definitely times where I throw my hands up in the air and go, you know what? I've got this great idea for a product, but it might take me 3, 6 months, 12 months to actually bring that to fruition. If things are, crazy at work or, just, life, the world, the universe is getting to me, I compartmentalize and sort of shut things down. But I think, being a creative person and D&D and role playing really lends itself to that. It's all synergy. If you play D&D, if you build your own characters, if you DM, all the building blocks are there to create your own content. You're creating your own content anyway in the stories that you make and the adventures you write for people. I guess it's maybe a little bit of a leap of logic, and certainly there is a leap of um, skill there in terms of learning the right skills for publishing. There's a big difference between an adventure you write for yourself in your shorthand in a notebook, and improvise half of it when the players make decisions, versus presenting something published for other people to use. Those heuristic jumps aren't there. You can't expect them to make the same improvisations you do. You are producing a product that needs to be ready to run off the shelf, so to speak, allowing for the fact that all DMs and all players are going to make certain tweaks, and they should. Everyone's game is different, but you have to have a product that's 99%, straight from book to game. So in the first couple of years, I actually found that transition quite difficult. Some of my early products, before release, I had people look over them and I realized they weren't cohesive. They weren't going to give people enough information. And so you do have to work a little bit hard at that. And especially when the standards have become much higher over the last couple of years, you do have to learn things like layout, presentation, synergizing the art well, getting an editor. I cannot stress that enough. If you're going to produce content, get an editor, because your ideas can be the most wonderful things in the world, but they've come out of your brain in this kind of, wave of excitement. You're really happy for this concept. You'll get it down. It's going to be wonderful. And, you realize that it's not legible.
Yeah,
someone else reading that doesn't
super
have
important.
the picture you have in your head. So, someone competent has to look over and go, yeah, you know what? You should probably rewrite this. The bones are there, but make it understandable. So there is a few skills, and in the early days that took a lot of time. Producing content was slow in the first couple of years. It's a lot faster now, and it's like anything: practice, practice, practice. I've got 50 odd products out. I like to think that the latest ones are better than the original ones. I'll leave that up to anybody who reads my products to make that call.
What is
and always happy to get feedback.
What is maybe something you've done that you're kind of like the most proud of out of those 50 products?
It's difficult to say. Simply because I think they mean different things in different ways. So some of the stuff, I'm always excited about the stuff I produce, and if I were to give advice to people who are looking to produce stuff, I would say don't get caught up in the idea of trying to find out what's popular and do that. Just write what you love. It'll be a hell of a lot easier. And if you're lucky, it'll also become popular. But I think the product I'm most proud of is the first Faiths of the Forgotten Realms product. Um, that was one of the earliest collaborations on DM's Guild. It actually started, a gent by the name of Scott Bean had this idea. He said, look, we're kind of, the DM's Guild community of producers do talk to each other constantly about what we're doing and our ideas and things like that. It's a, generally speaking, quite a good supportive community. There's a Discord, you get on there, you chat to people, people give you advice. It's all really quite wholesome. I mean, sometimes you look at Twitter and think, wow, sometimes the role playing community is a bit poisonous,
Yeah.
but they're very small elements. When you find the good people and you get them together and they're sharing ideas, it's honestly a wonderful place to be and be around. But we've been talking amongst ourselves a little bit about these things because at that stage most people were just producing small products one at a time of their own devising. And Scott said, well, I remember Faiths and Avatars. Domains are okay, but what I really want to see is I'd love to see the domains tied back to the gods the way they were in older editions. The specialty priest, instead of being a domain of order or a domain of law, it would
Yeah.
be a priest of Tia, the god of law and order. And what is that? You tie it to the god rather than the concept. And a whole bunch of people went, that's a great idea. He actually wanted paladin oaths. So he wanted to do a paladin oath, one paladin oath for each of the gods in Skag. And a whole bunch of people came together and went, that's a great idea. Let's do this, right? And then we started chatting and we went, well, what about the old faiths and avatars with the specialty priests? And suddenly it was like, well, we could do cleric archetypes in there as well. Oh, wouldn't it be great if we brought back some of the old spells? And this fairly small idea suddenly just became this huge undertaking. And very quickly, all these contributors who really weren't that well versed in collaboration just dropped off one by one. Oh yeah, look, guys, sorry, this is getting a bit too big for me. I can't do it. Oh no, I've actually, while we've been talking about this, I've got other priorities now, or things have changed. I can't do this. And we went from something like 20 or 30 creators to three of us. And in the end, myself, Scott Bean, and Alex Klippinger were sitting around and we were just the three of us in this chat, and we're just like, well, everyone else is gone. Are we just going to let this idea go, or are we going to do this? And we committed 100 archetypes, 150 odd spells between three people is a huge amount of work. We worked on it for over a year. We spent time play testing and play balancing it, theory crafting it, critiquing each other's work, going back over it, like really honing it. And it was a huge amount of work. It was a really rewarding experience. And when the book was finally released, we had no idea if it was going to be popular or not, if anyone was going to care. But we put so much of ourselves into it that we just really loved the product, and we're lucky that it took off. I mean, it did fairly well.
That's
It's
good since you guys invested so much time into it.
Well, look, part of being a creator is taking success and joy where you find it. So and again, advice to creators out there, I highly recommend not treating sales as success. It's one measure of success, and certainly, when you work hard, you want people to love what you do, and your time is valuable, your ideas are valuable, and you hope that people buy your products and they like your products and it enhances their experience. And so certainly sales is one great way of saying, look, it's good, people like it, and so forth. But I can tell you, especially in the last 2 years with COVID, the market is incredibly volatile. Products that a lot of us, and again, we all talk about this stuff. A lot of us thought, yeah, that's going to be a nothing product. Turned out to be huge. And other products where people were very excited, thinking, oh, this is, this is a niche in the products market that people are going to latch onto, and it's just vanished in the night with a whimper. So I can tell you, I've had both great successes and products that I've worked very hard on that have simply vanished.
What was the biggest sleeper for you?
Uh,
Like something.
so
When I say sleeper, I mean something that you did that you wanted to do, but you're like, this is just another thing. Like it's not going to be a big deal.
yeah, so there's a few things that I've done for that. I'm very lucky that most of my products have received bestseller medals.
Yeah.
And that's, it's again another measure of success, but certainly that varies. The lowest medal is 50 sales, so 51 sales. So to get a copper best selling product on the DMs Guild, or Drive Through RPG is 51 sales. So we're not talking, WotC Cobalt
Yeah.
Press level sales here. We're talking small producer sales. So, but a few things didn't pan out. I love doing them, but just didn't
I actually meant the
translate.
other way, where you didn't like you did
I
them
didn't
and
think it
like
was going to do well, but it actually did well.
yeah.
Um,
I'm not here
there's
I'm not here to
definitely
celebrate the shortcomings, man.
okay. Well, look, no, I mean, Faiths is easily the one
Yeah.
that we thought this will appeal to a few people, and the reason for that simply is fifth edition is set up to divorce itself from a lot of these hard connections. The oaths and the archetypes and so forth are all conceptual, so that you don't have to be tied to a god. You can be a god of war, you can be a cleric of war, a war cleric, but the list of gods you could be attached to is there's 10 or more of them. So it allows that I guess that opportunity to vary and still have the mechanics, but more opportunity to do what you want with them. The idea of tying it directly to a deity, I think, is a bit of I guess, an old school kind of concept or way of thinking. We were sort of going for our nostalgia. The three of us, we loved Eric Boyd produced pretty much all of those books. Now he had help on most of them, but he was the front runner on all of those, and that content for the three of us was so important to our gaming history, that we wanted to bring some of his work into fifth edition. So we didn't reinvent any of the lore. And in fact, we even reference the books and say, go back and have a look at Eric's lore, because it's amazing stuff. But what we wanted was, the experience we had when playing second and third edition of being, a cleric of Tyr or a cleric of Tempest or a cleric of Umberlee, and having that attachment to the deity. We wanted to introduce that to the new players. So, but we looked at that and thought, well, you know what, this will probably appeal to people like us, people who've been playing for 30 years. It's probably not going to latch on to the newer market where, it's perhaps lore is one of those things which is a bit of a hill to climb. So, and you see it with a lot of games when they've got long histories heavily tied to lore that's 20, 30 years old. It in itself acts as a bit of a gate to people. They look at it and go, oh God, I'd love to play Warhammer, but there's 40 years worth of lore, and even just the Space Marines, it's too much. I can't
It's
learn
why
that.
comic books always reset, right? They're like,
That's
you
exactly
come
right.
in, you're like,
Yeah.
I want to read Thor, but there's 400 of these. Never mind.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, I mean, the editions are great for bringing change, and change is needed. But yeah, some of us, love the change, want to embrace that, but also want to, keep some of the stuff we love. So look, we honestly thought, it'll appeal to people in our demographic, which is, a shrinking demographic
Yeah.
in D&D now.
We're getting older. We're aging out, dying off.
Absolutely, and you know what? I mean, some of us are getting older and embrace the change, but there are plenty of people in the community that are getting older and do not embrace the change, and they are vanishing at a fairly rapid rate. And you know, I certainly don't want to turn this political, but you know, D&D and RPGs, they need to be for everyone. We need to have new people. We need to have new ideas. Otherwise, we're just old men stagnating in the glory days. So. You know, but as the editions change, a lot of good stuff is lost along with a lot of bad stuff. So, you know, we thought with Faiths, we'll appeal to a small market. You know, we'll get, you know, 50, maybe 100 sales. We're at about 2,000 now, and that's a pretty successful product on DM's Guild. That's second. Oh, actually, technically third highest metal category. It's platinum. Adamantine. Oh, no, sorry. Mithril hits at 2,500, and adamantine at 5,000. And adamantine.
Ooh, that's a big jump there.
Yeah, it is. Look, it's yeah. Well, I mean, look, even I mean, the jumps are 50, 100. 250, 500, 1,000. So that, you know, it becomes this exponential scale. And if you do come across products that are, you know, platinum, mithril, adamantite, those are incredibly popular products for the platform that it's on. So, you know, we feel very fortunate that it did resonate with a lot of people. We certainly didn't expect that to happen. You know, and there's a few other bits and pieces. I put together a couple of small things on my own that I just thought, you know what, I was doing this anyway, and in you know, in my D&D game, and I thought, well, that's a cool idea. Other people might want to use that, and you know, some of them got picked up. The Descent into Avernus stuff did reasonably well. You know, not you know, didn't break any records or anything, but did reasonably well, and that was just stuff that I was putting together for my game, and I thought, well, you know, people might like this. You know, so I did some stuff with tieflings, where again, and it's a bit of a callback to the older editions where instead of just being, you know, tieflings and Azamar as being upper and lower planar, I split them up and went, okay, well, how about, you know, more subclasses? How about tieflings based on devils, tieflings based on demons, tieflings based on Yugoloths, you know, Azamar based on, you know, different concepts and different places and different progenitors. And again, that resonated well, and that was just something I was tooling around with. It's not necessarily a new idea. It's just something that I thought, well, it'd be nice to have a few more choices.
People love tieflings.
Okay. Sorry?
People love tieflings.
Well, tieflings are interesting because they are, of all the races, they've probably gone through the biggest change. And again, this stems back from Planescape. Planescape is where tieflings really first appeared as player available races, and they were this kind of chaos race. So you actually rolled, and again, I'm not teaching you anything new, but for the viewers, you actually rolled your appearance, and traits, so you might have, you know, cloven hooves, or you might have a strange sulfurous smell, or the whole idea was they were meant to be the antithesis of lore, so they had randomized features. This idea of
they also weren't a true race.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Yeah. Because they were essentially, you know, the lower planes beginning to filter through the other planes of existence. Whereas the whole idea of these, you know, pink or purple skinned tieflings with, you know, the horns, that was a sort of a 4th edition change. So, but let's face it, everyone loves the underdog. Everyone loves the dark horse, and everyone, you know, if you want to play your edgelord character, tiefling kind of sits in that as well. I've
tieflings and warlocks. 100% for that. I do miss the plain touched races where they weren't like the true races that they are now, where it was like in the woodpile somewheres, you know, somebody got it on with an earth elemental or a demon or an angel, and then every so often now an Azamar or a Genasi or a tiefling pops out.
Yeah,
of the
look, and
woodwork.
again, I think that really suited the sort of the fruit salad of Planescape, where
Yeah,
anything can happen, everything can happen. But I also, I mean, I appreciate that they make them more accessible as a contiguous race as well. And this is the thing about the different editions and settings. There's so much great stuff in all of it to pick and choose and put through your games. So yeah, look, I like that variation, which is why I created that product. Some people will like that. Some people look at that and go, no, no, I want my tieflings to be a contiguous race, and that's
yeah.
perfectly fine as well. There's no wrong way to play.
There's plenty of room in the game for for the various versions. We are just past the hour mark. Final thoughts before we head on out.
Uh, I don't think I ever have final thoughts. I was constant stream of consciousness. I could talk about this forever.
Yeah.
I look, I love chatting to yourself and anyone who'll talk D&D and gaming and so forth. So I hope anyone looking at this is is inspired by some of this stuff. And as much as I would love to plug my products, and please buy my stuff, like my stuff, tell me how wonderful I am. But what I would say is there is some really great content, semi-professional to professional content being produced by small producers now. It doesn't have to have a WotC label on it or a Cobalt Press label on it to be good content. So please, if you're on the fence, take a look at DM's Guild. Not just my stuff. There's plenty of other great stuff on there. Support small producers because we're all trying to build a better, more interesting game. So don't just dismiss it as homebrew, please. They're my final thoughts, mate.
Well, thanks for coming on. I know it's late over there. I appreciate you hanging out with us. As always, links are in the description. Go click away, and until next time, stay nerdy.